Hey everyone, welcome back or welcome if you're new. As we're continuing the series on color analysis deep dives, the topic for today's video is skin undertones. In my video on misconceptions about color analysis, one of the topics I talked about was that a warm skin tone doesn't always mean that you belong to a warm season, and there seemed to be quite a bit of debate about that, and a lot of people wanted me to clarify this point. And I actually have quite a bit to say about this topic as well, so I thought that making a separate video about it before deep diving into the individual seasons as we continue on with the series might be helpful for a lot of you out there that are feeling a little confused about this whole concept of skin undertones. I'm sure that everybody has heard of the term skin undertone and overtone before, but I know for a fact that a lot of people are confused by the concept still. So let's talk about it and let me share my perspective on this hot topic. So in my previous video, some people were saying in the comments about how I'm mixing up the terminologies between undertone and overtone, and that's why I'm saying warm skin tone doesn't equal to a warm season, etc. So to clarify, I don't actually like using the term undertone and overtone to describe skin tones, period. Not to say that the concept itself is wrong, but I personally think that the terms are being used in a way that confuses more people than helping them. Let me show you what I mean with some examples. So here's a chart that visually explains how undertone and overtone work together to create different skin tones of various depths. It seems pretty straightforward, right? You could have warm, neutral, or cool undertones as displayed by this gradient bar at the top that ranges from yellow to blue. And then below that, there's 4 different common skin overtones that are used to exemplify how the different skin tones are made up of. Now we have all these celebrity examples here, and you'll notice that some of these examples are frequently used by other color analysts as well. Like Emma Stone, for instance. She's brought up a lot as a bright spring, but based on this chart, her undertone leans towards cool. In the next line, we have Gwyneth Paltrow, and on this chart, it indicates that she has a very warm undertone, but she's often debated between a light spring and a light summer. Mindy Kaling and Naomi Campbell are both often agreed upon as some types of winters, but here it shows that they both have very warm undertones. And Oprah, who's often assumed as an autumn, has a cool undertone here. Now it could very much be that the examples on this chart are simply wrong, so let's take a look at another chart. Here you'll also notice that there are some popular examples like Nicole Kidman, who's usually agreed upon as a spring, but here it says that she has a cool undertone. Jennifer Aniston, often assumed as a soft summer, but it says that she has a warm undertone. Halle Berry, assumed as a dark autumn, it says cool undertone here. And then Oprah, here it says that she has a warm undertone as opposed to the previous chart. Of course, these are celebrities that we don't get to see and analyze in person, so we're only making assumptions about what their undertone might be or what their color season might be and all that, but that's besides the point. If we were to take a look at this chart and compare the middle 2 images, without looking at the labels, can you actually distinguish between warm from cool undertone? I mean, some of these can be more obvious than others, like this caramel. I think most people would assume that this person has a warm undertone. But with the rest of the images, can you actually tell which person has which undertone without reading the labels? I hope you guys are starting to see where I'm getting at with this. I'm not saying that undertone and overtone are incorrect concepts, but I think the way these terms are being interpreted by different people and being thrown around creates a lot more confusion. As a makeup artist, and if there's other makeup artists watching, you'll probably agree with me that finding the right shade of foundation for a client is usually done through trial and error. I can look at a face and assume what the skin tone is, but then we actually have to try a specific shade on the skin, and you might get it right on the first try, but a lot of the times we have to make adjustments to get it down to that perfect shade. Like I said, without the labels, it's actually quite difficult to distinguish between all these skin tones, whether they have warm, neutral, or cool undertones just by looking at them. I found out that I have an olive skin tone during makeup school. Our instructor used me as a model to demo a bald cap application, and I remember the foundation shade she used on the bald cap was something was off about it, and then she kind of looked at it, examined it, and she started making a green foundation mix to splatter it all over the bald cap. And that's when the bald cap started looking really natural, like it's my skin, and that's when I found out that I have visibly green tones in my skin. It was kind of an aha moment for both me and the instructor, and just the other day I was thinking about this instance and about how, damn, if this woman who has like 20 to 25 years of industry experience as a makeup artist and understand she works in film, so there's a lot more importance placed on making things appear as natural as possible. If she still struggles to spot these things, how difficult it must be for the rest of us, and especially for people that are not trained in this at all. You know what I mean? So the point is, I don't agree with the way this whole idea of undertone and overtone is presented as some sort of this mysterious skill that only people with the most highly trained eye and experience can tell the difference between. And the content that I'm creating on this channel is to help you understand the different effects that wearing different colors can have on your skin tone, and to help you spot those differences in the easiest manner. And if I feel like undertone is not an easy concept at all, even for people who have tons of training and experience, then how can I talk about it and pretend like I know exactly what I'm talking about? Even these charts that I was using as examples earlier, some of these are created by stylists and color consultants. And even as trained professionals, if we can't reach an agreement, I feel like it's just another way to add more confusion to people's lives, which we obviously don't need. Now here is another reason why I find using undertone and overtone to be a confusing way in determining your color season. As I said, I have an olive skin tone, right? And if we go by the rule of undertone and overtone, I have a cool undertone, which is blue, with a warm overtone, which is yellow, and that's what makes my skin tone olive, because blue mixed with yellow equals green. Now if we go by that logic, I have a cool undertone, which means I'm either a winter or a summer. The issue I have with this method of using undertone is that temperature isn't always the first thing you want to look at. I have a video called Why Do I Look Bad in Both Warm and Cool Colors, where I explain how as we add more white, black, or gray to a pure color, the temperature of that color becomes less and less obvious. And in my color related content, I always talk about how when you're trying to determine your best colors, you want to look at the three characteristics of color: temperature, value, and clarity, to understand which of the three characteristics you're the most sensitive to. That means if you're the most sensitive to the depth of colors, you might be able to wear colors from both deep winter and deep autumn palettes. As long as the colors are deep, temperature is not as important of a factor. But if I say,
well, I have an olive skin tone and therefore my undertone is cool, which means I can only be a winter or a summer,
I think that can easily be translated as a way to restrict yourself from certain color groups. If depth of color is the most important characteristic for me, and I can look good in both deep winter and deep autumn colors, then what really is the point of knowing my undertone other than trying to find the correct foundation shade? And even with that, different brands have different naming conventions, and like we saw earlier, it's very difficult to tell the undertone just by looking at the skin tone. So to me, and for a lot of people, identifying the undertone isn't as important as understanding which other characteristics of color affects my skin tone the most. And also, using the logic that olives have blue or cool undertones, then how are we going to explain some olive-skinned people that fall into warm seasons? So the way I like to look at it is this: the whole idea of the seasonal color system and finding colors that work harmoniously with your coloring originated from art, from painting. So if we were to look at our skin tone as a specific shade of paint that we create using a certain ratio of primary colors, because technically we can make any color using only the primary colors, right? Then having a warmer skin tone means that there's more yellow present and visible in the skin tone, and having a cooler skin tone means that there's a higher ratio of blue. This is regardless of undertone, just what's visible to the eye. Like I talked about in the Misconceptions video, there's such a thing as an assimilation effect, where when you put blue stripes through the circle, the color of the circle looks cooler and more blue. And with yellow stripes through the circle, the magenta now looks more orange and warmer. And finding your best colors when we're talking about the temperature of color is about finding colors that can bring a balance between the yellow and the blue in your skin tone so that the skin doesn't appear overly warm or overly cool. So what I'm explaining is that if your skin tone already has a lot of yellow, by assimilation effect, warm colors against your skin tone brings out the excess yellow in your skin, whereas cool colors have the opposite effect of neutralizing that. Whether these effects are flattering or not depends on the degree of yellow and blue present and visible in the skin tone, and how much of each side gets accentuated by wearing certain colors. So to clarify, when I'm talking about skin tones, I don't like using the terms undertone and overtone. I think that undertones are difficult to tell for most people unless you're trying on a specific foundation shade on your skin to actually find a shade that works for you. But even with that, like I said, labeling can vary by the brand and I don't always find them to be 100% consistent. So I don't really think it makes sense to use these terms that we can't see in an obvious manner. I find it easier to explain it's the excess yellow or the excess blue in your skin that's being highlighted by wearing certain colors. But I do understand how the wording can be confusing since undertones are also described as being warm or cool as well. So when I say the warmth of the skin is being accentuated excessively, I can see how that might sound like I'm talking about undertones. So going forward, I'll try my best to stick to words like yellowness of the skin rather than warmth, or the excess blue in the skin instead of coolness, just to avoid any further confusion. Now, with regards to the rest of the series, we're gonna start deep diving into the individual seasons in the next video. And since I always talk about how you wanna look at which characteristic of color is most important for your skin tone, how I'm gonna organize the series is rather than making one video for each of the 4 seasons, so one for spring, one for summer, autumn, and winter. Rather than doing that, what I'm gonna do instead is to group the seasons based on the 3 characteristics of colors and then talk about the similarities and differences between those seasons that are the most sensitive to temperature or to the depth or the value of colors, etc. So in the next video, we're gonna start with temperature and we'll talk about the similarities and the differences between the seasons where temperature is the most important. Why temperature is the most important characteristic for these seasons. And if you're debating between seasons, I'm also going to incorporate some tips around how to decide which side of the spectrum you would fall closer to. So if all of that interests you and you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, make sure to do that before you go. I'll see you in my next video, and until then, stay unique and stay gorgeous.